The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Great to have you in. Welcome to Tuesday. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency, full day of football to get into, as it was another open session for the Big Red this spring. We'll dive into it. Hear from quarterback Jeff Sims, Matt Rule. Also, post-practice thoughts. Mitch Sherman going to join us from The Athletic in about 15 minutes. We'll talk with Mitch, get his so far so good take on Nebraska spring football in hour two. Some Big Red baseball and a little Major League Baseball with Husker standout World Series champ Joba Chamberlain to join the show. Can join us as always. Number in for you, 489-1240, 489-1240, 402-489-1240. Wherever you hear us across the Hail Varsity Radio Network, 1-800-825-5865. Can not only listen but watch, stream the show, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Twitter. Give that a follow at HVarsity Radio. Can stream and watch the show on the Twitter handle, KFOR Facebook and Twitter as well. Connor Clark is, what did he do? Do you guys just play paper, rock, scissors when he's in to see who has to sit in with me? Or did you just want some alone time, Elijah, in the big studio?
Well, Connor decided he's leaving work early today, so yeah, ask him.
Family's important, right? Speaking of which, I'll see you guys in about it. I'm kidding. I'm not leaving early. Can't do it. But good to have everybody in and dive in. So, little funny note, my kid, better late than never, and occasionally there are some barbs when I wear stocking hats. Which South Park character am I? Been working to not turn into Cartman in my old age. But Junior just discovered South Park. He was binging it last night. I don't know if that's a good parental decision on our end or not. My wife's only response was, well, that was on when we were younger. But he has found some funny moments. Yay or nay on that? Is that did mom or dad ever shut down you guys from watching Beyond the Obvious, Spice Channel after midnight or any time? Connor's like, I'm blushing. But no, I mean, what about the parental guidelines?
I mean, I was watching Game of Thrones my sophomore year of high school, so I think South Park's probably fine.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think once a kid hits high school, he should be able to understand what his eyes can process and handle.
Don't be Jesse Pinkman.
And anything that a high schooler can find on TV, they can find things that are 10 times worse on the internet.
Sure. Twitter, whatever, TikTok, I mean, all of that. So
I don't think that's necessarily a bad age. In regards to South Park in particular, I can only handle about one episode at a time. I get through one episode and I go, okay, I need to change the channel. It's getting old.
Yeah, you're good. No, I mean, he was 5 years old when he saw Ted. That was an accident. But that happened, and then
accident.
No, it was. I was watching it.
I feel like this is fine.
Yeah. Every time we go out to dinner, he says, "Daddy, put your hand down," and he grabs a knife. But the other show that he just binged without us knowing, I thought he was watching G.I. Joe or some other animated series, and no, he got through Breaking Bad. We're sitting at dinner, and he's in junior high, and he's watching Breaking Bad on his phone. So long and short is I need to do a better job of paying attention to him as much as I pay attention to Nebraska.
Well, he can drive, though. He's 16.
Now, but I'm saying leading up to, there's a whole series of things he's probably watched that he shouldn't have. He hasn't asked any questions about any of it.
A smart kid.
Yeah, could be teaching me, right? So let's get into some football. I just had to go there with the South Park and the Breaking Bad and the attention to detail as a parent versus a football coach.
Well, the big thing is from watching South Park that the worst influence you don't want to let happen is don't let him become a Broncos fan. It's
Kiss of death.
Speaking from experience, yeah, it's been painful.
Mm-hmm. No, it absolutely. If he starts from the beginning, there's a lot of Bronco jokes in there.
Yeah,
that Super Bowl ring you have in your lifetime is just so terrible. It's just so awful.
Well, let's get into some spring thoughts and some sights and sounds. And you have the one thing, and this isn't major. This wasn't a headline coming out of spring ball, but Jay Moore talked about it a little bit yesterday, and I think it's important, and Coach McBride hammers it quite a bit. It's the individual time. It's not just the group work, but I need, as Charlie would say, I need a lot of individual time with guys to get the technique down, to get the work done, to teach them the different blocking schemes. And you got Pot Roast putting in some work with the defensive linemen, and you're going to have time. You're trying to find your three dogs up front in this 3-3-5 or whatever it morphs into, and jury's out on Wynn. Super talent out of high school, good enough to see time at Bama, not a ton of time, but any time at Alabama counts as a lot of time anywhere else. And then you also have Buckley. I mean, those are three names. You've been waiting on Buckley to play and flash, because I think there's talent there.
And the measurables are there in particular.
Sure. No, I mean, you look at a guy and you're like, okay, you fit our measurables. Come go kill a ball carrier or go get after the quarterback. So Wynn, Polar Bear, and Buckley are three guys that are getting more and more time, it sounds like, with the individual treatment from Coach Pot Roast. And that's key. And I'm anxious to see it translate clearly in the fall. But what do you take with you from this spring session? Can Nebraska really develop some defensive linemen beyond Ty Robinson that can be difference makers, not just guys who get off a block and hold you to 1.5 or 2 yards per carry? That used to be the standard. It's a different deal now. I mean, it's still great to be at 3 or under per carry, but it just, offenses are too good and too much passing going on. But be great against the run in the Big Ten is the theme. The other part is A.J. Rollins. And A.J.'s a guy I want to focus in on for a moment where, I mean, I just loved watching him ball in high school, catching the football, and he was really good defensively as well. But he was one of two guys wearing a gray shirt today, and they continue to try him at the defensive line. And Rule even talked about the fact that he might be leading us in sacks this spring. While a guy may not have the giddy-up that they want at tight end, and I'm just projecting, I don't know why, other than this might be a better fit for you. You like the ability to have a guy who's athletic enough to spend time. And we remember Rollins making a couple of nice catches from Harburg spring games from yesteryear. So there's athleticism there. If he can recalibrate and be a difference maker or another option off the edge and find a fit there, the more the merrier for this Nebraska defensive front to get after the quarterback. Stop the run, get after the quarterback. Those are staples in this Rule-led defense.
And with Rollins in particular, really interested to see the fact that he's working along that defensive line, because I've been concerned, I've said it on this show multiple times, the depth of the defensive line is probably my number one area of concern this year, especially once you get into the rugged Big Ten schedule. You're going to have injuries, you're going to need rotation, and just having three guys that can play at a Big Ten level is not going to be good enough. You're probably going to need 6, if not 8.
7.
Yeah, you need to have some guys that can rotate in through there and be solid. I see Nebraska as having 3, maybe 4 right now that we've seen, on the field, prove it, they can do it at a Big Ten level. Maybe 3, and one of them is not participating this spring.
I've seen 1.
And just Ty Robinson.
Just Ty Robinson. I mean, you saw some spot duty from Wynn last year. What type of jump does he make a second year in the program? Does he stay? I'm not saying he doesn't, but I'm saying there are guys that may be vying for first, second, or third depth chart standing, and they could still decide to take off in May. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's true, and I don't think there's. I mean, Wynn's been here, and I don't believe he could just say I'm done, and I don't think that's him. I'm not trying to start anything or be false there, but Wynn's a guy that you need to be big.
Yes, because it's not a question of is he good enough to get playing time? It's a question of I think you just have to give him playing time based on how thin you are on the defensive line. And that can change with transfer portal and with freshmen maybe stepping up as they arrive and they get some more playing time under the belt as their freshman year goes on. That's always a possibility. But based on pure depth, Wynn has to be a guy that can make some plays for you next season, because if he's not, he's going to have to see the field one way or another. That's just how the depth of the defensive line works in the Big Ten. So he's got to step up. He's got to make some plays. That's why you get into a guy like Rollins, and you saw that athleticism flash during the spring game, and he's a guy that
got in high school. It was awesome.
Fresh out of high school, and then he gets jumped in the depth chart by Borgacher. You bring in a guy in Eric Gilbert, and now you're looking, you're way too
Bonner and Applegate and Fedoni. Yeah, and you've got you look at it.
He's a guy who's way too athletic from what we've seen to be stuck at probably 5th on the depth chart. So you move him over to the defensive side where you go, you know what, we're going to need some more depth guys that can actually get some playing time this year. Where do you want to be, AJ? Do you want to be stuck on the depth chart and the 5th spot as a tight end, or do you want to be a guy that can potentially get some rotational time along the defensive line? And hey, not to mention, it's a brand new defensive line coach, and what do we always hear from coaches whenever we talk to them? They'd rather build a guy up from the ground up as opposed to having to tear down before you build up. And Rollins is that definition exactly. You get to start where you want him. You don't have to take away any of the previous coaching, and we've seen what a dedicated high-level defensive line coach can do to Nebraska's defensive line with Coach Tuioti a couple years ago. Within 2 years, he had that defensive line looking and playing different, maybe being the best unit on that defense as a whole. And then Tuioti goes off to Oregon. Dawson comes in, and you can tell there was some difference in coaching styles, some rebuilding that was trying to be done last year. It didn't quite work. We'll see what a dedicated, potentially high-level defensive line coach could be with pot roast experience in the NFL. What can he do with these guys? Because simply put, all these guys you're hearing about in one way, shape, or form are probably going to have to see the field this year, whether it be as a rotational piece, maybe it's as a special teams guy. That defensive line is so thin right now that all those guys have to make plays for you in the fall. It's
thin, and guys, you've not seen any really help given to the defensive line for years, because it's been, let's see how many plays you can run against Nebraska. Think of Purdue, for the love of God, a year ago, where it was 1,000 paper cuts, but they still ran 100 freaking plays on you. Okay, because in that instance it was Madden, where you're scoring in one play to Palmer. That being said, you can't live in the Big Ten where your offense isn't putting together a 3 or 4 minute drive once a quarter. Mm-hmm. You're gassed, and those big dudes are really gassed by the fourth quarter a lot. You saw the Northwestern game 1, week 0, and it looked like Northwestern should have been wearing red and white, either Wisconsin red and white or Nebraska red and white, the way they pummeled them. They were just gassed because you just didn't control time of possession. So it's going to be key. But this topic of unlocking, you're waiting for Polar Bear to be kind of unleashed. You're waiting for Wynn to get unlocked. A guy like Sims, what's a change of scenery? He was front and center today at quarterback, and the athleticism and talents there, the refinement continues, and then the unlocking of a guy like a Harburg. You kind of know what you got in Casey, and that's a great thing, even though he's injured. And then you got Chuba, who's a super high-level athlete as well. So there's a lot of candidates to get unlocked here this spring and keep the momentum.
Yeah, and I think the flexibility, just going back to the A.J. Rollins thing too, the flexibility of him, wearing a gray jersey, going both ways, I've liked that, and I've heard that out of the program so far throughout the spring too, and Harburg's been in that conversation a little bit as well. We've heard, maybe a little bit of rumbling of a position change there as well. But I like the flexibility between the players and the coaching staff. All right, well, if this isn't going to work out because you mentioned the depth of the tight end room and the talent that's located in there, well, maybe that's not the best spot for AJ, but if he still wants to get reps, he's flexible enough to go play at a different position, and he's obviously athletic enough to go do that as well. So I've liked that a lot about, spring ball this year. And you mentioned the unlocking of guys, and Jeff Sims is a name that you mentioned, a guy who's front and center today. And he's one that intrigues me a lot. He looks super athletic. Obviously, he has an athletic background, and we've seen the flashes of talent in his limited time at Georgia Tech. So what does that look like with Thompson coming back from the injury, and what can he do for this program going into summer ball and into fall camp as well? Because he's going to be a big topic of conversation throughout the spring and throughout the summer. So he's another guy that I have my eyes on throughout this offseason.
roles are going to be so important. The role for a Wynn, the role for a Rollins, the role for a Polar Bear, the front 3 or 4 that they settle on, the role for a guy like Ramir Johnson we'll get into in a little bit. Let's hear from Jeff Sims, specifically hear his thoughts on the offense so far. Good to get his front and center take on where this thing can go so they can be scoring more than about 21 a ball game in Big Ten play.
I think it's a very good offense. I think we retain information very good, and we just go out there and we fight every day. I think the biggest thing I like about the offense is how when we get a lot of stuff thrown at us, we just handle it, and we don't complain, we don't pout, we just go out there and do it.
Time for the balance. Let's squeeze that in because you want the balance, be able to throw it when you throw it, run it when you have to.
I think we're a real balanced offense. I think the run game is very good. We got good running backs, and the O-line they're very good in run blocking. And then in the pass game, we got receivers that's hungry. They're ready to go out there and get the ball. And the pass blocking has been tremendous in practice.
That's good. That is a good endorsement by a guy trying to win a starting job. Hey, they're running it, and I'm not getting crushed.
Or does that make you worried about what the pass rush of the defensive line can be?
We just spent a lot of time on the defensive line, and A.J. Rollins is leading the team in sacks, right, this spring. Mitch Sherman's on the way with Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time at Tuesday, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. Some thoughts from Coach Matt Rule on the way. Joba Chamberlain talks Husker Baseball and some MLB next hour. We welcome in Mitch Sherman from The Athletic, at Mitch Sherman on Twitter. Mitch, how we doing? Did you get some baseball in this weekend?
Had a little practice. I am well. Hope you're well. No, it's supposed to have a game tomorrow night, the season opener for our 12-year-olds. So I wish it was tonight because it's 52 and sunny and feels pretty good. But 24 hours from now, I think looks considerably worse. So hoping the forecast is wrong and we can play. Otherwise, our kids are on spring break up here, so we're not going to play until next weekend. Doubleheader on Saturday.
Good work. We are at Southeast tomorrow, and it's going to be an incredible 46 and partly cloudy. So, I hope
that's about what we're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot to digest from the open practice, Mitch, and some of the post-practice comments. And I want to start with A.J. Rollins and wearing the gray jersey. And you've seen him, and you saw him in Omaha as a prep standout, and same here. I thought he wowed and was excited he was coming to Lincoln for college football, and now he's kind of trying to find a home. And does it say, all right, good on this staff that they're using his athleticism to get after the quarterback, presumably, or does it say, wow, they've just found more options at tight end, so maybe there's not as much room as there could be for him? What's your take on Rollins, and what does it say to you with him maybe switching over to defense?
Well, I think they recognize the kind of athlete that he is and know that it's important to get somebody like that on the field. And I think it's encouraging that the staff is feeling the urgency there to do something that is going to benefit them short-term and long-term. And it may just be that they were thinking short-term, like, where can we use some help? Okay, we got this guy at tight end who's a good athlete but might not crack the top 2 or 3 at that position. So is there somewhere else we can put him on the field where we're not as deep? And Nebraska is deep at tight end because of Eric Gilbert and his transfer and Thomas Bedoni coming back from injury. I think if everybody's healthy, just from an athletic standpoint, those are the 2 most gifted players, and they're going to get a lot of reps, a lot of snaps during the season. Now, they've had a hard time getting on the field in the previous seasons of their college career, but Nebraska hopes that changes here in 2023. So if that's the case, you look at Rollins as a short-term fix on the defensive side, and maybe you lucked into something. With the way that Matt Rule described it, he's a natural on the defensive side. And he played defense in high school, but was viewed more as an offensive prospect. Sometimes, it takes this kind of a coaching change to shake some things up, to get a new set of eyes, a different perspective, and you might find something that just takes off. And, Rule seemed pretty excited today in talking about AJ as a defensive player. He said he's been leading, he's been the best pass rusher, has the most sacks so far through 5 practices, which, again, you can take as a question about who's out there on the defensive line, or you can look at it and say, all right, they've really found something. I think Rule portrayed it in the latter context, and maybe A.J. Rollins is a guy now for the rest of his career. This is to be determined, but there's the possibility that a change has been initiated that can serve him well for the rest of his career and help Nebraska too.
Yeah, Mitch, to your point about being able to see that situation with Rollins 2 ways, I kind of was the same way with a quote from Jeff Sims today about the offensive line. He said they've been protecting him well with pass protection, and I want to get your take on that. Which way do you take that? I think from my own eye test, the little bits and clips we've seen from practice and then what we've seen from the offensive line following practice at pressers, that offensive line does look just a little bit different. But do you think that they've made that kind of progress through this offseason and through spring ball that maybe they're not the biggest concern on this football team as they were a couple months ago?
Well, I think it's still a concern. I think it's a concern, in one, because of the lack of depth that they have on the offensive line. And, they're relying on a handful of walk-ons just to fill out 2 offensive lines and a first team and a second team. And I know Matt Rule had some good things to say today about several of the walk-ons who are there. But, that's probably not all of them are even ready to play at this point. Dylan Parrott is a guy who's been mentioned multiple times, a player out of Iowa who has impressed Rule with just his physical size. And now that they're out on the practice field, with his ability to operate on the offensive line. And I believe that the comment that Rule made in assessing it was that he's got a chance to be able to play. So that kind of puts back in perspective where he's at. They're not looking at him to fill one of the top 5 spots this year. If they do, it's because some injuries have occurred or there's been more attrition. So keep it in perspective, I would say, with where they're at as an offensive group. I would say I do believe that some of these guys have undergone a little bit of a transformation, and I saw that just physically with Turner Corcoran today. He looked to be in better shape, and he's dealt with a lot of injuries and has had to shift back and forth with positions, and there's been a lot asked of him in all of his seasons at Nebraska that I think has prevented him from developing into the best player that he can be. Remember, this is a borderline 5-star kid out of Kansas a few years ago who just has been a starter for Nebraska, but has not taken that next step to be kind of the all-conference kind of player that was expected from him, and he looks physically like a different guy this spring. So that's a good sign. I caught that comment too from Jeff Sims about how well they've been pass blocking for him. And I think some of that, and all the quarterbacks, I think some of that has to do with there aren't any ferocious pass rushers out there from a defensive standpoint. Nebraska's missing, of course, Garrett Nelson and Caleb Tanner from a year ago. Some of the outside linebackers like M.J. Sherman are just getting, Chief Borders, they're just getting acclimated right now. Ty Robinson is not there as a presence in the middle for the defensive line right now. So, and if A.J. Rollins can walk in and go across the other side of the ball and be as effective or more effective than anybody as a pass rusher, I think they've got a lot of improvement and a lot of steps still to take in that area, and that probably has something to do with why the offensive line is held up well in pass protection.
Mitch Sherman is with us on Hail Varsity Radio. And, Mitch, we were talking about as well as A.J. Rollins, but Stephon Wynn is a name on that defensive line that has struggled, at least depth-wise, so far this spring. Do you think that, Matt Rule and co. just kind of throws him out there and see what he can do? Because obviously the talent is there. He's from Alabama. Or is he a guy you continue to develop kind of in the second or third team? Or do you just kind of throw him in right away because of that lack of depth?
Well, the urgency is there with him. He's a 6-year senior, and he's had a lot of opportunities in his career. At Alabama, of course, he's behind All-Americans, at every turn. And then at Nebraska, there was a chance for him to come in and be a big-time contributor last year because it was a different level of play. The guys who were in the defensive line room were a step down or several steps down from what he experienced with competition internally in the first 4 years of his career. And he didn't grow into that kind of a player who was out there consistently changing the game. So, and I haven't heard much about Stephon Wynn this spring. That doesn't mean that he, is disappointing. We'll hear from Terrence Knighton, Nebraska's defensive line coach, soon, and that'll be a question like, all right, has the light come on? And Knighton doesn't have anything to compare it to, other than seeing that he was recruited by Alabama and then coveted by Nebraska out of the portal. So, the physical skills are there, but it's got to translate to the practice field, and it's got to translate to the playing field. I don't think they're looking at him as a guy who's just a body who can be a second or third team guy. If that's the case, he's probably not on the roster come August. If he's going to be there, it's a step up now and step into a role where you can really impact this team.
Mitch Sherman's with us. Mitch, want to wrap up with some recruiting thoughts and impressions you have with just the work and this unofficial visit weekend last weekend where you had so many high-star guys in town led by Dylan Raiola, the job Rule and staff have done to get him here on their own dime.
Yeah, just getting them to come was a big win for Nebraska, having that weekend, pulling it off, and keeping it together. Sometimes when those big weekends with unofficial visits are put together, they look really good, a few weeks or even a few days out, and then things don't materialize because flights weren't booked or they were more expensive than the recruits thought. It's a little bit different than when the school is paying for everyone to come in, and the players don't have to worry about their hotels or their flights. So the fact that they ended up bringing in just about everybody who was scheduled, and a number of 5-star guys and a dozen or so 4-star players, and of course Raiola was here, and you had Baker, the big offensive tackle from California, and Williams Nwaneri, the D lineman from Kansas City, who I thought there were some questions a week ago about whether he was going to make it in, and he did for a short period of time before moving on to Ohio State. Look, it just sends a message from Rule to these kids and to other kids too, because players all over the country see that Nebraska brought in this kind of talent on an unofficial visit weekend, and they're going to be curious and want to know what Rule's got cooking, and they're going to hear about it from some of these players and read, like everybody does, the comments that those guys who were here make after they leave. So we'll see, and I'm not expecting necessarily in the short term, and maybe not even in the long term, for that weekend to produce a high number of players in the 2024 recruiting class. But listening to Rule talk about it today, that's not necessarily a problem. That they're in the mode of getting their message out and building a foundation where now they can get some of these guys or maybe some guys who these players influence to come back for the spring game or to come back and set official visit dates later in the spring. And that then can go the next level and start to fill up the 2024 class for Nebraska.
Mitch, about 15 seconds. What are you working on with the Athletic, bud?
Just got some stuff from Matt Rule's availability and observations out of the open period, the open 40 minutes that we had at practice today. So that piece will be out tomorrow, and then we'll be on to defense on Thursday. Sounds good. Mitch, appreciate your time. Good to spend a few minutes with you. Thanks for jumping on. All right, thanks, guys. There he is, Mitch Sherman with us from The Athletic. Find that podcast portion of Hail Varsity Radio with Mitch Sherman. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and yes, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. What's the correct stance on your rival? We'll get into that next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. Good stuff from Mitch Sherman. A reminder about your friends at Dyer Law and Personal Injury. If you've been hurt in a personal injury accident, You can count on Dyer Law, that team, to provide you with a helping hand when you need it, no matter what you're dealing with. Call Dyer Law and the team today at 402-393-7529 or visit dyer.law to chat with trusted professionals about your personal injury claim. That's dyer.law, D-Y-E-R.law, 402-393-7529. And this leads in perfectly. There are some of us out there that hate our, air quote, sports rivals so much you've dreamt about personal injury. Some of us are more measured the older we get. An awesome question from not our Elijah, but another Elijah.
Great name.
Random question. I see a lot of folks wanting their rivals to do poorly. You've had a lot of Nebraska basketball fans with pleasure smirk, point, and laugh about Creighton's demise. I was raised to root for your rival unless you're playing against them. Otherwise, what's the point of a rival? What's the point in a rivalry? Thoughts? Nebraska's pretty unique because, yes, Creighton's a rival, and there's, dare we say, animosity from the Nebraska fan base and the Creighton fan base. I've got a really close friend, the pharmacist, Jeff. He went to pharmacy school at Creighton. So there's a couple of Creighton games I'd go to with him, more so the NIT era. This is when Billy Gillespie was wrecking the Ferrari at Kentucky, so it was NIT. This is a long time ago, but yeah, maybe I need to be washed still, but I went to a Creighton basketball game. Growing up as an undergraduate in Nebraska, you wanted to beat Creighton in basketball, and you were expected to do it. Things have mightily shifted the last 15 years or since Altman and then Mack. So they're really good, and I think you got to respect it. I responded, listen, you don't cry if your rival gets beat and if it hurts. You want the loss, if your rival is to lose, to hurt. But you don't want them to suck.
Because then the losses don't hurt. If every game is expected to be a loss, the losses will never hurt.
Well, think about Iowa. Think about Iowa a year ago. They're on the doorstep of another trip to Indy. That's what the beautiful part was for Nebraska fans. As much as Iowa's put Nebraska out like a cigarette over the years, post Kenny Bell in overtime, you ruined their season last year, arguably. You ruined their postseason for sure. And you're a 3-9 football team with an interim coach. And they can't cover one dude. Right? They didn't allow 21 points hardly at all last year. And you go in there to their house and you're partying with the Heroes Trophy in the Nebraska section if you're Garrett Nelson and company. Mm-hmm. That is pure joy if you're a Nebraska fan. During the Oklahoma heyday, there were people who would get rid of body parts, let alone the narrative being, I don't care if we go 0-10, but let's beat Oklahoma. And then it shifted to Colorado. You don't want them to come in. You want game day, noon kickoff, whatever. You want, when Colorado and Nebraska face, man, you want it 1-2 or 2-3. You want it to matter beyond a trip to the Orange Bowl. You went, and it did. It was for the conference title. It was for an Orange Bowl trip for Nebraska, Oklahoma, for Nebraska, Colorado, for the Big Ten West. In some of the years when you took on Wisconsin, you want it to absolutely matter. You don't mind if they stub their toe, but they can't be god awful.
And we have a great comment in from Scott on this same topic. As for the whole rooting for your rival thing, I've always done that with OU, but I hope CU doesn't win another game this century
or next. Scott, it's all right. And there are Nebraska fans who've had really horrid interactions with Creighton fans. And there's Creighton fans that have had bad interactions with Nebraska fans. It happens. Listen, you can't find a Nebraska fan that will endorse the city of Boulder other than to go there, drink their beer, and win the football game.
And then leave.
Hopefully with a windshield. So, no, I think you want your rival. It's better if they're as good as you are.
It's more satisfying.
It is, absolutely. I mean, isn't that kind of the that's how I've always approached it.
Well, if Iowa were to go out and lose all 12 games next year, you better believe I'd probably celebrate every single one of those losses.
Oh, yeah.
But if it becomes 3 straight years or 4 straight years of Iowa being bad, eventually you have to reach a point where you go, you need to be better just so that this can continue to be a rivalry.
Yeah, you want to keep caring and having the passion.
Right.
But it also becomes a misstep where, all right, you really can't lose to these guys. There's the pressure of wanting the bragging rights and to keep a really good season going. And then there's the other pressure that Iowa faced a year ago where not only did you not go to Indy, but you lost to a 3-9 Nebraska team.
Well, and I look at this conversation with the Bears-Packers rivalry that I've obviously been taking part in rooting against the Packers my entire life. But, historically, at least since I've been born, it's always been the Packers have been better than the Bears. And every time the Bears beat the Packers, it's very highly satisfying because the Packers are usually pretty good and, contenders for Super Bowl each and every single time. So, I mean, that makes it nice. The one year that the Bears were able to win the division, the Packers weren't great, but it still was equally as satisfying. And with Elijah, say if they were bad for, say, 5-6 years, it probably wouldn't feel as great. It'd still feel good to beat them. But, that sustained success of your rival definitely helps. Now, I'm not saying I'm going out here and I'm rooting for the Packers to win every game. Even though I know they're going to win more games than they're going to lose, I'm still rooting for them to lose. And maybe I'm the odd man out there, but I'm not going out there rooting for Iowa to beat every other team except for us. Same thing with CU, same thing with Oklahoma, whatever the case may be. But that's just kind of how I look at it because I think the Bears-Packers rivalry is probably the most significant one that I pay attention to with my fandom. So that's kind of where I go in this conversation.
And to your point, as a Broncos fan, I'll celebrate every single Chiefs loss. I'll celebrate every single Raiders loss. I don't care if they go 0-16. I'd prefer if they go 0-16. But
I'm right there with you.
It gets back to my point, though, of if you have multiple seasons of this team just floundering, at some point you have to go, you guys have to get it. I'm not going to root for you guys to get it together. I'm never going to root for you guys to win a game. But I'd much prefer you guys are competitive to make that heartbreak that much worse whenever you eventually lose.
Well,
it's more satisfying if you beat your rival when they're good.
It's a weirdly nuanced conversation of, I'll never root for my rival, but at the same time, I don't want them to be winless whenever they play us.
It's where are you at with your feelings? Is it hate or respect?
Well,
I hate Colorado, but I respect Oklahoma? Is it I hate the Cardinals because I'm a Cubs guy? Is it I hate Kansas City because I showed up in my Bronco gear and they gave me a wedgie in the men's bathroom? or vice versa. You walk into Mile High with Chiefs gear on. I mean, there's some bottles being thrown at you, too. It works both ways at Arrowhead and Mile High.
Well, I think the success of your rival, too, creates some of that hatred for your rival as well. So I think that plays into it, too, because there's respect there, obviously. But the Packers winning, whenever I see Aaron Rodgers win, I dislike him even more, probably. So I think that goes into it, too.
At least he's moving.
Thank God.
Thanks for the great question, Elijah, in the stream chat,
good
by
stuff.
the way.
We'll wind down hour one. Joba Chamberlain next hour to hit Husker Baseball, some MLB. Hail Varsity, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Coming up here next hour, we'll dive into some comments from Matt Rule and what is Ramir Johnson's role for Nebraska. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and Connor Clark. Find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, at Herbal Essence for Elijah, and then for Connor Clark at C_Clark_27. Reminder to get buckled up. 1 of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an alcohol-impaired driver. Why take chances? If you drink, don't drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office, talking rivalries and what's appropriate. Listen, there's no right answer. I'm not going to tell you how to feel. And I'm in a unique position because 2 of my dear friends, one's a Creighton guy, one's an Iowa guy, Iowa Russ and pharmacist Jeff, Creighton graduate. So, but they're not obnoxious or evil. They're not. They're not the trust fund puke in Boulder that is trying to pick a fight with 4 guys in the front row of the end zone in Boulder back in 1997 with the end zone where Amon Green just ran laps. And then, as fate would have it, every game in Boulder, Nebraska, aside from a 1, was up by 3 touchdowns. And then you hang on for dear life and you hold on to win a game you were up by 17 or 20 points to you hang on and win by 3. I mean, that's how that story always went. So it comes down to treatment. Like if you are interacting with the opposing fan base, what's the treatment like? And that's where a lot of it goes. On top of the heartbreak, like the on-field product, are they just breaking your heart all the time? And Sooner Magic sure as hell did that a lot about 35, 40 years ago.
Yeah, and see, for my generation, it's losing, 7 straight games to Iowa, who only had good teams in 3 of those years. That's the equivalent. It's not the same, but I think that's why my generation
they had okay. Like I call when I think of good, like their 2015 team that was on the verge of a playoff.
Yeah,
and then they go to the Rose Bowl and get just boat raced by CMAC. Mm-hmm. The context of good, like good for the Big Ten in that era, or good. But no, I mean,
but I think part of that's why my generation feels that rivalry towards Iowa maybe more than your generation, because of the fact that you've looked at 5 of the past 7 years. This Iowa team's looked pretty beatable, and you fall every single time, and it's kind of part of that where it's. This Iowa team isn't even that good yet. The fans are dancing on Nebraska's grave, and I think that's what kind of adds to some fuel to the fire that the older generation might not feel with that rivalry.
You really honestly, if you're an older Nebraska fan, you have had a hard time believing what you've seen the last X number of years, because it's a good Iowa team, just as an example, that's 8-4, 9-3. Maybe they get 10 wins, but they don't wow you. They either out-toughed you or haven't screwed themselves, and that's what you're not used to seeing that from Nebraska
wins
football.
You'll ever see.
Sure, but you can't knock it because you haven't sniffed that for 6 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like too, and maybe this is just me, but I feel like there's kind of a conference-wide, I don't want to say hatred, but I feel like Iowa might be the most disliked team in the Big Ten, at least in my opinion.
I think 3-4 years ago it was Nebraska because of the way they entered the Big Ten. But now, to that original point about the rivalries, it's hard to root against somebody whenever they're terrible. Like I feel like if there's any team in the
pay attention to
the Big
There's
Ten,
apathy.
I feel like people probably want Nebraska to do a little better than they are. They don't want Nebraska to go run the Big Ten, but other teams are actually rooting for Nebraska to get back because they go, it's no fun to root against you
No, it's
anymore.
turned into, why did we add you? I mean, seriously, the brand, and that's trying to be changed.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you at Hail Varsity Hour 2. We're presented by Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. And Connor Clark is off this second hour. Do we or don't we code red him on Thursday? 402-489-1240. 402-489-1240. Numbers to get in. Can find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, at Herbal Essence, and always watch the show at HVarsity Radio on the Twitter handle, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, KFOR Facebook, and Twitter is where you go. So we'll catch up with Joba Chamberlain, Husker standout and World Series champ, here in about 15 minutes or so. Get his take on Big Red Baseball tonight against North Dakota State. That search for a third arm in the weekend for Nebraska and Will Bolt. And, of course, some previews with Major League Baseball opening day on Thursday. 489-1240, 800-825-5865. How do you treat your rival? That's a topic we hit the last half hour of Hour 1. Do you wish them ill will, or do you want them full strength when you play them? Is it hate or respect? And it's in the throes here of what went down with Creighton, as you've had a chance to digest for Nebraska football. Good day today. It's a open practice earlier this morning and post-practice with Matt Rule. And let's start off with Coach Rule's reaction on the recruiting weekend. And this is Matt Rule's philosophy. And I love what Coach McBride said yesterday. Listen, if they're that high level, they're 4, they're 5-star, you don't want them to tell you, as the program, what you want to hear. Don't have them say, yeah, I'm in, caught up in the moment. If, for case in point, you have Gage Ginther, who joined us, saying, no, I'm going to Tennessee this weekend. I'm going to Penn State. I'm going to Oregon. I'm going to USC. I'm going to UCLA. Let me see it all, and then what sticks with you. Nebraska's done a marvelous job of staying in contact. They have not been that gun-to-the-head used car salesman. Buy it now. But it's a really good approach. And is it for you, and are you for us? Mm-hmm. But here is Coach Rule, and it's telling, really not selling the program. It's kind of a show and tell versus that hard sell, or let me talk you into it. You may hate it later.
You know, I think the thing even at Temple, like, we had a lot of great players come through there because it was right in Philadelphia. Baylor was right in the middle of Texas. So I think we always had a lot of good players come through. But that was a really fine group that we had coming through this weekend. And really, really great families, really cool people. The thing that we don't do is we don't really recruit. You know, we're not trying to talk slick. We're not trying to tell everybody things that they want to hear. We very simply talk about our program, how we're going to do things, what we're built upon, and also our vision for each person and what it'll be like when they're here. So it's really transparent. It's not for everybody, but I think a lot of guys will find that they'll want to come to a place like this, come to Nebraska.
So that's the rundown there from Matt Rule on his approach. It's pretty refreshing. There's some guys you want and you want to talk into. And Elijah, it's a whole different ballgame, isn't it, man? It is NIL, whether that's the first thing asked or talked about by a recruit or program, or the last, but it's part of the conversation. It's known. It's known Nebraska's a big-time player in NIL, but what you don't want is to get into a bidding war where a kid's already got a car better than an assistant coach, and he may or may not care if he plays.
Well, and what's been interesting to me is, as I do see NIL as a big factor in Nebraska's opportunity to get back into the upper echelon of college football, and obviously other things need to happen aside from just being able to use your fan support for the good of the program. It's huge. It can help you get you back. But one thing that has been part of the selling point of a lot of these top schools that have now kind of seen some of the pitfalls of NIL is they've been trying to sell, you know what? We're here to get you to the NFL, not to get you NIL. Yeah. That's been a big argument that's been coming from the likes of Alabama and Ohio State. And those are schools that have NIL resources, but that's not their main selling point to kids, because you know what? The NIL resources come to the guys that are 3-year starters that are going to go off to the NFL that make a big difference. And yeah, sure, those dollar signs can flash in your eyes whenever you're being recruited. But at the end of the day, where the big money is in the NFL. And we at Ohio State, for example, or Alabama, or name your high-level program, is going to say, what do you want? Do you want NIL for the next 4 years, or do you want NFL for the next 14 years? Mm-hmm. That's up to you. And I think you have to have that natural give and take within the program of, yeah, Nebraska can try to get some recruits in here using NIL, but at the end of the day, what these high-level recruits want, these 5-stars, is they want to go be first-round picks in the NFL. And they have that kind of potential based on what their athletic acumen looks like as a 17 or 18-year-old kid. They have the potential to go be a first-round pick. And I think it's going to be Nebraska's job to say, yeah, we'll take care of you while you're here, but your end goal is not to come to Nebraska and receive NIL money. We'll treat you well there, but our end goal is to get you to the NFL and go get you to be a first-round pick, because if we can turn you into a first-round pick, you're going to give us a high-level product on the football field, and that's going to lead to wins.
Is it something you want it handed out, or do you want it earned? Okay, and then it's a mindset, and a lot of it's shaped with how were you babied or treated at previous stops. What school did you go to? What coach did you play for? And what development? What kind of personalized coaching or training have you done? Are you a tough love, or I'm your friend, not your parent? To me, that's it. And you can recruit all types of kids with different backgrounds and different home lives and different rules in the home or wherever they're from. But ultimately, you fall in line with what your rules are. And this is no pun with Coach Rule, but it is about earning. And he touched on a new tradition that he wants to open up. and that is the single-digit situation. And this is Coach Rule talking about that. That's the thing. And you've seen guys earn that single-digit number. Levante David, Randy Gregory, Malik Collins. Those are 3 boom, boom, boom guys that they were JUCOs, not Malik, that wanted the single digits. And all right, cool. That's a thing. But Rule's like, it's going to be a thing if you earn it. And this was more on Matt Rule and a tradition he's starting with guys, how they get that single digit if it is that important to them.
When I was at Temple, it started when I was the offensive coordinator at Temple. Al Golden was the head coach, and then I did it when I was the head coach there, and I did it as the head coach at Baylor. And then Willie Taggart took it to Oregon when he went there, so it kind of became something. But I got really tired of having a guy in my program who had spent 3 years and number 47, was getting ready to play and wanted to wear number 1 or number 3, and he had earned it, and we would give it to a recruit. So what we decided was, 1 through 9, and now 0 through 9, would go to the 9 or now 10 toughest guys on the team. And when I say toughest, we define that for the guys, but really the guys who best exemplify what it means to be a Cornhusker, right? To be accountable, to be dependable, to be tough, hardworking, competitive every single day. And so as we get into training camp, those we'll vote on it. It won't be the coaches, the players will vote on it. And we hope it kind of becomes a tradition. So while as we have wholeheartedly embraced all the great traditions that are here, hopefully this will be something new that people will get into, and there will be a long line of guys who earn that jersey number. A lot of respect for the guys that were in those single-digit jerseys, because it's not fun to have your number taken away. But I think the cool thing now is, as recruits say it to me, as guys say it to me, can I wear number 3? Absolutely. Just have to earn it.
Good take. Now, I'm willing to negotiate if you're as good as Randy Gregory or Levante David for that single jersey number. That's just that sounds really weak on my part. But if you could get the crystal ball out and say, "Oh yeah, you're high-level draft picks and you're awesome," you can kind of see that.
Well, yeah, with a guy like Dylan Raiola, you say you're gonna have to earn that number 1 if that's what you want to wear. But also at the same time, no one else has a claim on it while you're around. You just have to show up and do what's expected.
It's kind of like layaway right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's on layaway. It's number layaway. 1.
It's on layaway. Good old layaway. So let's talk about roles. We just talked a new tradition, but what is the expectation for a Rahmir Johnson? He's a guy that kind of flashed 2 years ago. Man, I loved watching him on the wheel route against Michigan. Big-time touchdown. The stadium exploded. He's a tough runner. Finally, they turned back to him against Iowa. Grant wasn't getting it done, and Rahmir was, well, it wasn't all Grant, but Grant, you had Rahmir running better between the tackles to try and grind out some yards. Rahmir's career has been a roller coaster, and to his credit, in the mother of all transfer eras, he has stayed put, kept his nose to the grindstone. He's grinded, he's talented, and he's a perfect fit for what Nebraska wants. This staff, dude with speed, big-time track athlete, and a tough kid from Jersey. He's fast and he's tough.
That's the big thing for me, is despite his size, and Anthony Grant shown flashes of it, he seems the most willing to run through contact. Anthony Grant's been there, he's done that, but you see Rahmir Johnson with his small frame, he's light. You think of him as being that, that fleet of foot guy, but whenever he gets down between the tackles, he's willing to put that shoulder down and get an extra 3 yards, 2-3 yards, and that's what I've always respected about Rahmir, is the fact that, you know what, you can look at Scott Frost's offense, and you can look at who you are as a player and say, no, I'm a guy who's going to bounce, and I'm going to be scared of contact. He understands the Big Ten. He puts his shoulder down. He's always been willing to lay his body on the line for the team. That is something I have always really, really respected about Rahmir, and it kind of made me question why we didn't get to see him all that much last year.
No, I mean, he was moonlighting as a slot guy and go kill it on special teams. My answer, and I have no proof of this, but you immediately, if you're Nebraska, kind of clamped on to the new shiny thing. And that's, be it, remember the Eel, Greg Bell, number 1 JUCO running back in the country, Well, he's this high-level recruit. Here is Washington. Guy's an incredible specimen as a speedster athlete, but clearly wasn't gonna make a living running between didn't want any business of running between the tackles against Minnesota in 2019. And then you go get Grant, who has done it at a high level, but not as consistently as he would have liked at Florida State. And he started off the year being a bit of a hammer. I mean, knocked out a Rutgers guy. He's physical. A.J. Allen got hurt. But there's been Ramir just withstanding, persevering. And Ramir talked a little bit about it because he was asked today, I think Sam McEwen asked him, what the hell happened? And he didn't ask him that, but that's what I'm asking.
It'd be funny if he said that.
What the hell happened with your playing time last year? Because we all wondered it. And listen, we can do the eye test, and as a running back, you look at a guy like Grant, and you look at a guy like Allen, and even Irvin. Gabe Irvin's wowing. We aren't getting to see it, but I think we will see it. But even Gabe Irvin is a true freshman, big stud out of California. Let's grab him and immediately let's play the hot recruit versus a guy that is going to give you a little more consistency. Now, I'm not saying Irvin could have blown up and been big time, absolutely, but he hurt his knee against Oklahoma.
But I think to your point,
he's just Ramir's been an afterthought, and it shouldn't have been his fault.
He's been an afterthought because of how he looks, but how he plays and how he carries himself is like a Nebraska running back of old. That's kind of the heart of my point from earlier. Is like, despite his physical limitations, he plays like you want a Nebraska running back to play.
Here is Ramir answering that question a little earlier on what happened last year, and to his credit, high road and focused on the here and now.
Life is life. Adversity is going to hit. You just got to learn how to overcome it and just go from there. So, I can't dwell in the past. Got to look forward. That's all I'm thinking.
Were you banged up, or did you feel like they didn't see your value as well as the previous coaching staff? Like, what was the issue that kept you off the field much of the time until the Iowa game?
And I don't have like the right answer for you. I just know, I worked hard all year. I was available, and things happen, and it is what it is. But I'm here now, looking forward to this season, and getting ready to work for this team and this coaching staff ahead of me.
So there's Ramir's take on it. This is Matt Rule's take on Ramir Johnson and his potential use.
I think when you go back 2 years ago, you see Ramir as, really, really a productive player. I've been really, really happy with him. I've been happy with him all off season, but I think he's had a really, really good camp. I think he had like I don't know what period it was. I think the first play, I think he had like a 60-yard run the other day. I think the thing with Ramir is he's quiet. He does what Christian McCaffrey used to say to me. He wished that players would, the best players play loud. And so Ramir, so far, is playing loud. Excellent outside zone runner, but running with power, picks up blitzes, can run all of our halfback passing game is, there's a lot of option routes, a lot of things that require some depth, and he's picking it up really well, really coachable, and an excellent guy all throughout the program. I think if you talk to anybody, everyone likes him. So really happy with him. I think he has a ton of roles. Today we had a couple of receivers down. Asked him, said, hey, be ready to go out and play in the slot. I think he's a guy that could do all of that.
He's a dude that I see as could be a third down beast, third down back. If we're going to isolate what he can do, as Irvin was talked about being that fourth quarter thumper, Ramir could be a third down back, but can do first and second down things. We'll see where it shakes out. I think Nebraska's in a good spot with their running back options, and Coach Rule said the same. Joba Chamberlain up next. We'll talk some Husker baseball on the way with Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it at Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency, World Series champ, standout Husker. We welcome back in Joba Chamberlain with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Joba, what's good? How you been?
You know what? The weather's getting a little bit nicer. We don't have any rain, so we're not going to get canceled today for our games. So it's been it's been an interesting spring. Let's just put it that way.
Aren't they always? I've got an umpire, I've got a ball player, and then I got the radio geek. That's our triumvirate here, and Yeah, I was bummed out. I was waiting for Junior Squad last night, and we get the email, games canceled. Maybe we can pass the hat around and just build a dome someday.
I mean, hopefully. But, yeah, I mean, it was crazy. It's in unplayable fields. Like, I don't even know what that means.
We didn't. I mean, there had to be standing water at Sawyer's Snell for me growing up to not go Olay at third for Babe Ruth practice anyway.
Yeah, who knows? Densmore's kind of hit or miss. If there's a drop of rain, I feel like they always cancel it.
I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong at all. Not wrong at all.
This is not Festivus, though. We will move on.
We just need that new sports complex to open up already.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. That's going to be awesome. That's going to be really good. Joba, let's start with Husker Baseball. Good weekend against the Illini for Friday, Saturday. Still looking for that third arm. But right now, as Nebraska, they get a little bit of a breather before Michigan, North Dakota State tonight at Haymarket. Your takeaway here is now we're 20-plus games into the year. Pretty good 1-2 hammer for Nebraska. And we'll see if they can develop that third arm. But what are you thinking so far with the Big Red?
No, it's been great. I mean, you got a guy, just stepping up and Emmett and doing the things that you do on a Friday night. You set the tone for the weekend, and it's finding that missing piece, and it's so close. I mean, swinging the bat's great, getting big hits, and I think it's just the combination of getting a couple more guys in that pen that can be consistent, and then finding that third guy, because that's sometimes the make or break game, and that game's just as important, sometimes not more important than the Friday. It's great to get off to a good start, but then, that could change the series and either sweep it or, come out on top with the series victory. So, everything we kind of talked about throughout the whole year, it was trying to get those big hits, trying to find that guy that was going to step up. And like I said, I think you get a couple more guys in the pen being consistent that can, maybe shorten the game and lengthen the game at the same time and find that third piece of the puzzle, and there's going to be some things that are really going to happen that people are going to like.
Joba, I want to get your opinion as a former pitcher yourself with the consistency issues in the bullpen. That's been something we've talked about for a couple weeks now. How much of it do you think that the weather could be playing a factor there and these guys just not being able to get into it this season? You've been there, you've done that. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've had some cold days, and I mean that definitely plays a part as far as grip and everything that way. But I think more so just the consistency is, just continuing to be put in situations to where you have the understanding and you're able to slow the game down when it tends to speed up. Because in those situations coming out of the pen, sometimes it's a firestorm and you're trying to put it out. And so you have to be able to slow it down. And, obviously the weather doesn't cooperate with us early in the year. And so, but I just think it's the aspect of them getting in those situations to where they're able to slow the game down and, take a deep breath and understand the situation. And, I think they'll be fine. I mean, they're going to get into some tough series here, and they've already been in some tough ones. So it's just going to be consistency of them just getting out there. And obviously, hopefully the weather warming up will help as well.
And Joba, as a quick follow-up to that, with the issues the bullpen's been seeing and how hot the bats have been all year long, do you worry that there could start being some tension between the pitchers and the batters in this team whenever, the batters are given run support every single game, but it feels like the bullpen, maybe once a weekend, maybe once a week, is letting the team down?
Not necessarily. I mean, they have great coaches that understand that that's the way the game works sometimes, because then it's going to come back tenfold, because there's going to be days that they're throwing up zeros and they don't get a hit. So it goes back and forth. And, just with the leaders that they have and the guys and the understanding of what the game of baseball is, I don't see that happening. I mean, it's frustrating because there's times where you're like, man, I just lost 1-0, and it's like, well, come on, guys, let's go. So it goes both ways, and it gets frustrating from both sides of it. I mean, I've been on both sides of it. So I don't foresee that happening. It's just they know what they need to do, and it's not a secret. They all know, and you just have to get better in every aspect.
You've got Corbin Hawkins and Jake Buns, and I really liked how Buns looked pre-injury, and I think he's working hard, and we've seen him this season. You've also got C.J. Hoods going through the live non-game action this week as he's getting ready to return from injury. Who do you like in the bullpen? I guess if I'm asking you to bet on a horse, who do you like as that third guy that you think could find the consistency and maybe settle in?
You know what? I got a chance to talk to CJ when Cart was at camp there, and you know what? I think he has something to prove, and I think that's a huge part. That's like getting somebody back from injury midway through the season. It's like you're adding a free agent, and I think just going through it now, it's a process, and he has the stuff to do it, and I think he has something to prove. And the fact of I'm going to come in and be a big part of this team, and just talking to him, I could kind of feel that. And when there's always something in store, and you play with the little chip, it's always fun to see how that comes out.
What gave you a chip when you were in either at Nebraska or beyond? I mean, you were in multiple big moment situations in your career.
The biggest thing was probably people saying I couldn't do it. So you end up, it's like, you know what? You don't think I can do it. I know I can do it. So you know what? I'm just going to go prove you wrong. And it was just putting in the work. And that comes part of everything is like understanding your routine, understanding what it takes for you to get ready, and sometimes, like we've talked about before, especially when the beginning of the season, we were talking about Max and how he was pressing last year, and sometimes less is more. And, obviously he's gone out and swung the bat incredibly well. So yeah, it's finding that thing that makes you tick, cause we all have them. And so it's the balance of your everyday routine and what it takes to get ready, and finding out what inside you makes you be the best you can be.
Joba Chamberlain's with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. And Joba, one last thought here on Husker Baseball before we shift gears, talk some MLB opening day, which is upcoming. Maybe we also get some World Baseball Classic thoughts from you as well. But with this Husker Baseball team, how much of it do you think, especially with the bullpen and that pitching staff and those Sunday starter, how much of it could one game turn around to performance or turn around your season's performance? You get one game where you scatter some base hits throughout, you feel confident. Can that change a season for some of these guys that are struggling early in the year?
100%. It's like I said, it's that one thing, like there's going to be one outing, or there's going to be one at bat, or there's going to be one game where it okay, I felt it. And that could come from the whole team aspect. Every team that is successful has something in their identity and what it is. And I think we're close, but I think we get that third starter where somebody comes in and they're like, all right, this is mine. And I just think as a whole, now collectively as a unit, you're like, boom. When we were at Nebraska, it's like we had Dunzing on the weekends and he spent 10 years in the big leagues. It's pretty incredible to have a midweek guy like that. And, all the guys we had, and it was a collective thing where we never felt like we were in or out of a game because we knew we could score. We knew we had some guys at the back end that could stop the bleeding. And so, yeah, I think actually you're 100% right. There can be one moment or one game where you're like, okay, boom, now the direction that we know we can get to is on course.
Joba, it was a big weekend last weekend at Nebraska, and I think you'll have your moment here in the near future, or you should anyway, with your jersey out there on the wall. But you're close with Darren. Of course, you played growing up with Alex, and then Shane a little before you, more my era. But you've crossed over with all three of those guys in your career, and you've got a big part of that Husker family. Thoughts on their honor and just what all of you have meant to baseball in Nebraska?
I think it's huge. It's something that hasn't been done, and it's cool just to see all three of them left legacies. You look at what Shane did and how he put us on the map, and then Darren obviously speaks for himself, and then Alex, and growing up with Alex, it's always special to have somebody you grow up with, you play against, and then you play with, and then you play against them again. And, I even faced Darren in the big leagues too. So, it's just, it's unbelievable to see. It's a program that has come a long way. There's history there. You could go down the line. Ken Harvey, Matt Hopper, Aaron Marsden. There's so many guys that have been huge influences on this program, and it's just going to keep getting better. And, I think Will and his staff have created something where, they want to come here again. They see that legacy. And I think that's part of it too. Like when you see those numbers and those names and you go back and look, you're like, man, I want to be that. Like, I want to have my number up there someday. Like, what do I have to do? I have to work a little bit harder. I have to be a leader. And one day I want mine up there. And I think it sets a standard of where now, people get a look and kids are going to be like, you know what, I could do that too. And I think it's really cool. It was cool. It was like Twitter was going crazy. Like, who's the Mount Rushmore of Nebraska? And like, I think I spent like 30 minutes going through like everybody's opinions, and it was pretty cool to see. It's something to say I'm the only one that's ever won a College World Series game, and that's something that I hold near and dear to my heart. But I told Rob and Jeff early in the year, I was like, can somebody else win so I don't have to keep talking about it? Like, I want us to get back there and to win. Like, selfishly, I'm like, you know what? We have the talent to do it. Somebody go prove it. Somebody go be better than me. Somebody go win 2 games, and how about we win the whole thing? So, yeah, no, it's cool to see. I think it's something that was definitely needed and warranted for all 3 of those guys and the careers that they had, and more importantly, the guys that they were. They were just great people. Obviously, growing up with Alex and seeing him, and then getting to know Darren throughout the time, and then Shane was a little bit before me and had a couple conversations with him, but there was, just the legacy and the impact that he made and the things that he did on the field was obviously special.
Joba Chamberlain with us, Hail Varsity Radio, Husker standout World Series champ, talking some Husker baseball with us. Okay, we look at opening day, and despite the Astros losing the last few years, that's Garrett Cole, that's Greinke, that's Verlander to free agency, their rotation does not have anybody 30 or over. Man, I'd love to be 30 again. But they are the favorite. They've got the duo of Valdez and Javier. Hunter Brown's there. That's another potential ace. And Houston's the favorite right now, almost an 80% odds to make the playoffs, just shy of 8.5% to make the World Series. Are you in on Houston as... Are they your favorite as well? They're the baseball writers' favorite right now, but do you think Houston's got enough juice to do it again?
Yeah, that 1-2 right there, those dudes are nasty. It's fun to watch those guys go to work. Yeah, I was a little surprised when I was checking. First of all, opening day should be a national holiday and nobody should have to work so we could all watch baseball.
Amen.
I'm going to petition for that. But no, man, the parity in baseball now nobody over 30 and the impact that they have already made, it has been incredible. And, they're starting to bring guys up faster than they used to, because if you miss 18 days, then they get an extra year to hold you. Like, a perfect example was Volpe this year with the Yankees. They had a choice, but he makes opening day. So then now that in turn gives them less of a contract before he goes to arbitration. And so, you gotta go with them just for the mere fact of youth, experience. They've been there, they've done it. But there's so many great pitching staffs. Is it hard to go against a 1-2 of Scherzer and Verlander, even though they're 40?
They're pretty awesome stuff.
Justin's gotten better. And that's crazy to even say. Max is Max. Max will always be different. Max will always, pitching against him at Missouri is that, and then pitching with him and against him my whole career, that dude is something. and he's always prepared. He's always that. Then if you can keep the guys in Texas healthy with DeGrom and those, there's so many good 1-2 punches that it's like it's going to be fun to see. And who knows, are they going to get back there? Hopefully, you never know. And you never know, somebody's going to come out of nowhere, and now you're like, holy cow, now they've got another guy. So it's going to be a fun year to watch. I get excited about it every year because you always get that one or two guys where you're like, holy cow, who is this? And then one or two guys you're like, man, it's good to see them back to the form that they should be. And so, yeah, it's just – I get excited for it every year. It's opening day, but now we got 162 of these things, so it's going to be exciting.
Joba, now that we've seen the pitch clock in action through spring training, I need to get your thoughts on how that's going to change the game of baseball.
Man, you know what? Everybody that I've talked to has been a huge fan of it, and obviously it's going to take some getting used to. I think as of now, they're not making any changes. I feel like there's going to be some, and I don't think it's going to drastic. There's certain things where I don't think that should end a game. I don't think the pitch clock shouldn't dictate an outcome in the 11th inning of game 4. Like, that's just, it needs to be decided by the men playing against themselves. But everybody I've talked to has been a fan. It's obviously, and it's not as big as you think. The average spring training game, I think it was only 28 minutes shorter, but it's just the tempo and everything. I mean, you're not going to be able to get as many beers, let's just put it that way. But that's going to be the biggest hurt is that. But no, everything I've seen, and people have adjusted, and I think it's going to be good. I think it changes a lot of things. I think I've seen it in spring training where Scherzer's kind of messed with some people, and, just as soon as he's in the box, you can go. It doesn't matter anymore. So, and necessarily you might have to if you get down to whatever the clock is at. So it was weird at first, and you could tell people were very leery of it, but I mean, it worked in the minor leagues. Those kids made the adjustment. I mean, so it's something that I think is going to affect the game, but not as much as we thought initially.
Joba Chamberlain's with us. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Joba, we'll get you out of here. A couple of thoughts. Were you glued and locked in on the World Baseball Classic? What'd you think of that showdown between Japan and U.S.?
And I need to get that take on that seeming passing of the torch moment between Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout. It almost felt like that best player in baseball title was given to Shohei Ohtani on that night.
Yeah, you know what? It was, I think there's obviously a lot of people that didn't necessarily agree with the Baseball Classic and when they do it and what have you, but representing your country is different. It's something that you can't describe, and when you get to do it and then you're going against the world, it's incredible. I mean, I got goosebumps more times than not watching those games and it necessarily wasn't even just Team USA. It was watching some of these other guys and seeing what it meant to them. Like, Freddie Freeman was born in California, but his mom's Canadian, and she died of cancer, and his whole thing was to represent his mother. Mm-hmm. Like, there's something to be said about playing Major League Baseball 100%. But, like, just listening to those stories and actually what it truly genuinely means is something. And I wish some of the other guys would be in it, some bigger names, for especially the U.S., but what a lot of people don't understand, sometimes in the language of their contract, they're not allowed to. So people were like, oh, they need to do this, kind of getting on some guys that didn't do it. But you never know what's in their contract or what they have going on. So, but yeah, every game, the passion and like what it is for me, it was like they're 12-year-old kids again. When they hit a homer, they rush out. And it was so neat to see. And then, just the championship, obviously, with Japan and in U.S., and as they're walking down the line with their flags and that, it's just like, I loved everything about it. I mean, it was obviously, it sucks with Edwin Diaz and that, but that could have happened in a spring training game, and there was obviously Altuve gets hit in the hand, but that can also happen in a spring training game. The one thing that I do, but if you're playing in the Classic, there's really no off season anymore anyways. Mm-hmm. So you just start ramping up a little bit earlier. Like, we didn't see arm injuries. We saw patella and a broken hand.
Right.
Like, everything that could happen normally in a spring training game. So from that aspect, I was like, you're a little leery just because they're like, oh, they're getting started so much earlier. But you're not really, because you're prepared coming into spring training anyway. So there was nothing I could say bad about it. I mean, I think it was great for baseball. I think it brings people together in certain aspects that if you're a Braves fan or a Mets fan, like, there's just something, it's like, I did it for this and that. But Elijah, going back to Ohtani Trout, like, I literally almost called that to a T. I go, it's going to come down to them two. I go, baseball's the greatest game ever because it's somehow always happens where it's like, that's exactly what it should be. Like, that was what that game should have been, down to those two. And I mean, Shohei's, I don't know if he's human, first of all. I'm pretty sure he's some type of character that they put in a video game and he just happened to come alive. But I mean, just the cool thing too is, like, Shohei never takes BP. But he took BP just to make sure that the other team knew what he could do.
Showing off.
Dude, he never takes BP during the regular season. But they were playing, and he literally said it. He goes, I went out to make sure, and he almost hit it out of the stadium. It was like 4 rows from the top.
That's impressive. You mentioned Volpe, Joba, just to end it, and they showed the moment getting the news, going to the show. When you got that phone call and you arrived in Yankee Stadium, who welcomed you in? What teammate or member of the club?
Mine was a little different. I got called up halfway through the year.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and I don't know anybody. Like, Volpe at least was in spring training.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about what they do now is, excuse me. So when they get called up, you at least have an idea of who they are and what it is. But I showed up to the Rogers Center in Toronto and nobody knew who the heck I was. I mean, I had just signed 2.5 months ago. So it was a little bit different in my aspect. The first one to ever say hi when I got into the locker room was Ron Vallone. And he was like, you haven't been here long. And I was like, nope, I haven't been here long. So mine was a little different. And then next year, it was just, I didn't get called into the office or anything because I'd already played.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but yeah, making your first opening day roster, whether they tell you or not, is something you'll never forget. And it's a memory, like walking for introductions on game one. There's nothing like it. And, it's one thing to get there. It's another thing to stay.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully your first one isn't your last one and you keep working. So yeah, I was fortunate enough to see 11 of them. So it was, 10 technically, but I was hurt for one. And yeah, it's such a cool moment. And the best are the reactions, because do you think you get so close to the end and now you're getting called in and you're a young kid. So you immediately think, you're like, oh, they're sending me out. So it's like you don't know what you're going in there with, because obviously you've answered questions. He's been talked to by the media, like, what do you think? Have you earned it? And, I mean, he earned every cent of that.
Mm-hmm.
But you still never know. So it's like the wave of emotions that go from here to here, and you're like, oh, I could be going back to Scranton, or, I'm headed to New York. So the range of emotions of all of it is crazy, because they can go from one to the other. And yeah, it's making that opening day roster, running out here and your name called for the first time on a big league field is something special.
Joba, great chat today, man. We'll get you hollered at again, and thanks for talking some ball with us here on Hail Varsity, man.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks for having me.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. Winding down a Tuesday with Hail Varsity. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Good stuff from Joba Chamberlain, talking MLB, Husker Baseball, and some Husker legacy last weekend. Good stuff from Joba. Check both those segments out. Podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. The segments, if you want to hear just from Joba or Mitch Sherman, had a good rivalry discussion as well in there, and plenty of Matt Rule and some Ramir Johnson, some post-practice thoughts from today. On today's show, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Subscribe to Hail Varsity Radio. Catch Coffee and Cream, as always, as well with your friends Damon Benning, Andrew Rogers, 7 to 10. Check their show and segments out as well. And Hail Varsity YouTube. Want to watch the whole thing, do it there. Keep hammering that. We love the YouTube channel. Really love how it's grown. Appreciate that. Awesome post-practice from Aaron Sorensen, Brady Oltmans. Check that in as well. And then the KFOR Facebook and Twitter handle. Give Elijah a follow. Rate his mustache.
Or don't.
Did I just frighten you? At Herbal Essence is where you find Elijah at Schmidt_radio. Tomorrow, Mike Babcock will join us. Mike Schuhart returns as we gear up for the Masters, just 2 weeks away. We'll talk to Shuey about some of the picks leading up to Augusta. And then Evan Bland going to join us. We'll talk with Evan, get his take on things with Big Red football and some baseball. And we're shifting a bit to, the pursuit that is a reality with Nebraska basketball. As I think Nebraska in the market for the Arizona point guard.
Kerr Kriisa.
Yeah, he is visiting.
And excuse my pronunciation, he is from Estonia originally.
I know, he's a hell of a good point guard.
Yes, he is.
He's awesome. But he's in the portal. He is visiting Nebraska. I think Robin Washut had that reported, to give Robin some credit. So that's there. You hearing anything on Trout or no?
No.
He wants to be closer to home. I wonder if it's Oklahoma.
You wonder if it's Oklahoma? I wonder
for Trout.
I wonder Creighton.
I mean, it wouldn't shock me if he goes to Creighton.
Would you go to the team that was 1 point away from a Final Four this year?
Versus the team who got bounced again as a top 2 seed?
Yeah. So I do wonder about Creighton with Trout. With the kid from Estonia, one thing to follow there is NIL is not a factor. With those international kids, they are not able to profit off their name, image, and likeness while they're in the United States.
To the locker room. Stay away from our point guard or our shooting guard that can't get NIL either.
Well, I look at that and I go, obviously there's a lot more to college sports than making money, but I go, there's a
Sean Miller Arizona joke in there about.
I'm just sitting there going but he was the point guard for a number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament this year, and now he's looking at Nebraska being the first stop once he's in the transfer portal, and you go, and NIL's not even a factor?
It's Fred, baby.
It could be Fred, yeah. It's just it's one of those interesting things that you have to think about in a situation like this. That NIL is not a factor.
So you're asking out loud, but not really why. Why are you looking at Nebraska if you're the
there's been a lot made on social media in the past week or two that there's still only one Power 5 team in the country that's yet to get an NCAA tournament win, and it's Nebraska.
Maybe it's the lore. Be the guy who takes Nebraska to an NCAA tournament
Maybe
win.
He's just a big Dylan Raiola fan.
Possibly
from being down in Arizona.
The Raiola influence knows no bounds. Talk to you at 4 tomorrow with Hail Varsity. Thanks.